All right, hey guys. So today we've got Dr. Vern Saboe with us from Oregon, and he has just completed some work with the legislation, and so we were going to talk to him about that today. So thank you for taking time and being on here with us.
You bet.
So, can you kind of take us away? Set up the fight that you guys just had.
Sure. Out of the gate, what this bill does is add chiropractic physicians, naturopathic physicians, physical therapists, and occupational therapists to the list of qualified health professionals who will have the authority to assess a concussed athlete and determine if and when they can return, utilizing the evidence-based and consensus-based protocols for the stepwise progression of activity, sports activity, going back in the stepwise process, as well as academics. And as you know, that's ever evolving. And in combination with that, all qualified health professionals will have to have completed the online concussion return to play course that Oregon Health and Sciences University, the medical school, is putting together. Jim Chestnut, the concussion expert up there, is putting together. There'll be a competency exam and then a certificate of completion. And so the providers will be self-identifying to the school districts by way of their certificate. There won't be a national registry. And so that will be fully implemented in 2020. We had to back it up a little bit because Oregon Health Science University started pushing back because of timelines. They were concerned they weren't going to be able to get it together. So we wanted to give them some breathing room and give them what they wanted, since we had been battling medicine for 3 years on this issue. And so a little history that brought us to this point, I think, is instructive. As you very well know, chiropractic sports physicians have been acting in the capacity of team physicians for many, many decades. We have colleagues on the U.S. Olympic medical team since, I think, 1984. In fact, I think Goodhart was on worked with the 1980 Olympics, Winter Olympics, when we won the gold medal in hockey. But really, chiropractic sports physicians, as I understand it, were implemented in the Olympics back in '84 with the Los Angeles Games. And of course, we have colleagues on almost all the NFL teams, NHL teams, baseball, yada, 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 and then also provide services for many other sports, professional sports, and including professional track and field. However, in September 27th of 2006, the Oregon School Activities Association, which is a quasi-public agency who basically gets its funding from the school districts, came out unilaterally with a list of healthcare professionals they believed were adequately trained to assess a athlete suspected of suffering a concussion and determine if and when they can return to play on the spot, and or if they've been concussed, when they can start the stepwise protocols back. We weren't on the list. And the list included medical physicians, osteopaths, physicians' assistants, nurse practitioners, but not us. And the reality of that is it's all about the money, quite frankly, as it most often is. And in our opinion, what it had to do with was the Oregon School Activities Association Sports Medicine Advisory Committee was overpopulated by medical physicians and physicians' assistants. And the reality is, at least in Oregon, and I think this is probably not unique to Oregon, the large orthopedic clinics like to populate the school district football fields, track and field, soccer fields, basketball courts, the ice, with their employee athletic trainers whose job it is to, of course, funnel all of those orthopedic injuries back to the large orthopedic clinic. Chiropractic sports physicians acting in the capacity of team physicians run the risk of disrupting that business plan. That was never spoken of. They would never admit to that, but we believe, at least in our opinion, that was a great part of the opposition. So they came out with this unilateral list saying that didn't include us, and so the Beaverton School District came out with a new policy from their legal department saying, well, chiropractors can't be team doctors anymore in our school district because you're not on the list, and we're concerned of liability issues. That's when I got a timely email from our good colleague, Dr. Ted Fulcrum, who's the treating physician for the Portland Winterhawk professional team. He's been on a couple of U.S. Olympic medical teams. He's involved with multiple sports, has lengthy credentials in sports injury. He contacted me and said, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this. And that started the conversation. And then we got the then Western States Chiropractic College, now the University of Western States, the new president, Dr. Joe Brimhall, to chime in on behalf of the school and said, hey, by the way, look at our training. We should be on the list. Of course, that fell on deaf ears. And then the conversation continued. Our president of our Chiropractic Association chimed in, said that we are adequately trained, we should be included, and all of which was for naught. And we kept the pressure on. And then in October 4th of 2012, we had a teleconference meeting of chiropractic physicians, myself as the profession's lobbyist, Gary Schultz from the University of Western States, Dr. Ted Fulcrum, Dr. Craig Kowalski from the University of Western States in charge of the sports medicine master's program. And we talked and started putting pressure on the OSAA, and they formed a subcommittee of the Oregon School Activities Association Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. They formed a subcommittee on concussion to look specifically at our chiropractors trained in concussion. And they came to the conclusion, their final meeting after many weeks, in September 9th, 2014, December 17th, 2013, they came to the conclusion that if a chiropractic sports physician had one or two of the board certifications, the CCSP or DACP-SP, then they were adequately trained. We thought matter closed. As a trade organization, we really didn't, and lobbyists, I didn't really care for it, because there was no stipulation that physicians' assistants and nurse practitioners and the other providers had to be board certified in sports injury. In fact, there's no track for them to gain that. But at least we had somewhat of a consensus, and we're going to go with it. We weren't going to fight them. And the great majority of our colleagues that do this work are board certified.
Right.
Well, unbeknown to us, and a sheer lack of integrity, the same body, the OSAA Sports Medicine Committee, without input from us, without even giving us a heads up, the full committee voted the OSAA Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, the full committee, which included the chair of the subcommittee on concussion, who voted yes, and one of the physician's assistant, or the athletic trainers, who also voted yes, changed their minds or changed their opinion, and in those minutes stated, appropriate healthcare professional. The group discussed and ultimately made the decision by a vote of 8-0 to define appropriate healthcare professionals who can clear an athlete, the same as those who are allowed to perform physical examinations, which chiropractic physicians in our state can by statute, with the exception of chiropractors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I had those minutes, and I had the original minutes of the subcommittee's conclusions. So then in 2015, we were embroiled in many other bigger fish we thought to fry, which was including getting Section 2706, all of the non-discrimination provisions, into state law in case Congress repealed Obamacare. We were the first of two states, Rhode Island the second, to get all that non-discrimination language into our state law that applies to commercial health insurers. So even if Obamacare was repealed, we would still have all the non-discrimination law that would be applied under Oregon state law. Huge. After 8 months of work group meetings and so forth. I was embroiled in that, thought this issue was taken care of. They then slipped a bill through the Senate Education Committee, not the Health Committee, which included the list of qualified health professionals and conveniently left us off. So then in 2016, we introduced a bill to rectify that. We had a myriad of medical organizations against our bill. We had the Oregon Medical Association, the Oregon Association of Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons, the Oregon Association of Orthopedic Surgeons, the Oregon School Activities Association, and the Oregon School Boards Association, all opposing our bill.
Wow.
So it was a short 2016 session. We got into the 2017 session, introduced the bill again, and it was a strategic part in the hearings, and this is in front of the Senate Education Committee. And Senator Arnie Roblin's the chair of that committee, staunchly in support of chiropractic physicians. They just flat lied to him and the committee when they passed the first bill.
Okay.
And so during that hearing, strategically, one of the officials representing medicine flat lied to the committee and quoted a letter from Dr. Webb, who was the one dissenting vote in that subcommittee on concussion that voted that, yeah, okay, if chiropractors had one or two of the board certifications, they were adequately trained. He was the only dissenting vote. There were 7 other votes in favor. They read a letter from Dr. Webb stating that, well, I was on the Sports Injury Medical Advisory Committee, and I was on the subcommittee on concussion. And after several weeks, our committee came to the conclusion that even chiropractors supposedly board certified sports injury were not adequately trained. Well, I happened to be sitting in the weeds in the hearing room, wasn't going to testify. I had all my sports docs testifying. We were the last to come up, right behind this fellow. And Dr. Roblin, Senator Roblin, called up Sherry Stock Morris, head of the Brain Injury Alliance of Oregon, who was staunchly in support of us, the author of the original Max's Law in Oregon. And I stood up, and he said, well, apparently Dr. Saboe too. I had the actual minutes who said just the opposite of what the fellow just testified to. It was a bold-faced lie. And I made them pay for it. That served us very, very well in the next session. And because of the huge opposition, we ended up adding naturopathic physicians, physical therapists, and occupational therapists, strength in numbers. Mm-hmm. And I had all those lobbyists working with me. And we ultimately, in this last 2018 session, got the bill passed. And it was very strategic to get the help from the other professions. So the reality is, due to their lack of integrity and not doing what was proper and right, fair and just, and what they agreed to during that subcommittee meeting, because they're afraid chiropractors would disrupt their business plan, in our opinion. Well, now they don't have to deal with just us. They have to deal with 4 different provider groups. So it didn't serve them well. And so my message is really to showcase our superior training. I had, with that, I had Dr. Ted Fulcrum, who was absolutely killer in his testimony. Dr. Laura LaJoy from Wilsonville, team doctor for the local high school, did an excellent job. And she, in fact, strategically turned a no to a yes, a very strategic senator on the Senate Health Committee where our bill went through. And it was Senator Steiner Hayward, MD, teaches primary care at the Oregon Health Science University, who originally was, well, chiropractors aren't trained in concussion. And Dr. LaJoy, meeting with her privately at several sessions, completely turned Dr. Steiner Hayward around to where she was one of our staunchest supporters. And so that really is an attribute to or Senator Steiner Hayward that showed a real true integrity. She didn't allow her ego to get in the way. Once she was educated to our training and skill sets, she completely changed our view. And she was one of our biggest allies against the Oregon Medical Association. And then lastly, Dr. Glenn Zulinski gave a very compelling testimony for us with video. He's a functional neurologist, treats athletes that have been concussed and veterans and other concussed patients, getting incredible work results using Ted Carrick's work. He's got all the fancy equipment and so forth. And what was really killer was he showcased this one particular case of a young woman who was in a car accident, suffered a horrible concussion. She had been to everyone. She had vertigo. She couldn't track properly. She couldn't do her sports she loved, which was trampoline. She had been everywhere, including Mayo Clinic. And he said that she had planned for several years for this trip to South America. He didn't say it was the Rio Olympics. And he got her, worked with her, and like within a couple of weeks and doing her home exercises, got her all the way back to her sport that she loved. And then he flips to the video of the Rio Olympic Games, and she's a Canadian trampolinist, and she goes on to win the gold medal. It was very, very compelling. And you should see, especially Dr. Steiner Hayward, the senator, that's a medical doc, their mouths were all open. They were just flabbergasted. Yep. And so it was a combination of a lot of moving parts and getting all the right people there, all of my sports doctors, experts testifying, and they all came up to the plate. And that's really how we did it. Truth prevailed in the end.
Wow, that's quite a story. I've always, I've kind of wondered, it seems like that's not an uncommon story where a nurse practitioner or physician's assistant who is in family practice and has never, I mean, I'm sure that they sat through some type of class where they talked about concussions, but may never have actually seen a concussion before, and just get a carte blanche to clear somebody. And it seems like a lot of times that happens almost without, they talk to them and maybe have them stand on one leg or look at their eyes or, ask them if they've had a headache. Right. And that's how they clear them. And
they're not trained.
Have somebody stand up and actually fight that person should be, or that physician or their medical professional should be allowed. And an entire rest of the world of other sports minded folks that have had a lot of training shouldn't be. It's almost mind boggling.
One really compelling moment in the hearing was when Dr. Steiner Hayward, the medical physician senator on the Senate Health Committee, who teaches primary care at Oregon Health Science University, who's developing the online course, whose office is just down the hallway from Dr. Chestnut, who's developing the online program. She stated in the committee when the Oregon Medical Association was testifying about their doctors having, ample training, they don't need more training, so forth. She goes, well, excuse me, but I'm board certified in primary care, family physician. I teach it at Oregon Health Science University. And I wouldn't want anyone assuming that I know concussion. I don't. It's not in my wheelhouse. Yeah. And simply because I have certain letters behind my name, I wouldn't want anyone thinking that I know concussion. Now, I may be comfortable removing someone from play, but when to return them in the stepwise protocols, that's not my wheelhouse. And I wouldn't want anyone to assume that it was. It was very, very compelling.
Absolutely. So how did you go about reaching out to the physical therapist and occupational therapist and the naturopaths and kind of bringing them on board? Was that a fight they were having individually, or did you kind of start it for them and get them to join?
Well, no, it was a combination of things. One, we immediately went to the naturopathic physicians. I went to them. I know they're lobbyists very well, Phil Donovan. We've worked on other issues together. We brought them on very early. Well, then it was actually Dr. Senator Steiner Hayward, the medical doc teaching primary care, that in one of our work group meetings, she said, well, I'd like to expand it further. And I would like to add the occupational therapist. And we all kind of looked at each other and go, don't they teach you how to button your shirt when you've had a stroke? Well, we weren't gonna. She was leading the work group meeting, and she was our supporter, so we weren't gonna say anything but, yeah, that's a really good idea, Senator. It just came out of the blue. And when she did that, I thought, well, for goodness sakes, I've worked with Chris Murphy and the doctors of the physical therapist.
Yep.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I said, hey, this is what's going on. You guys, you got some sports physical therapists. You guys need to be a part of this. He goes, well, thanks for the heads up. And and so, and I worked well with their lobbyist. And so that's how the groups came together. we basically invited the naturopaths and the physical therapists, and the senator invited the occupational therapist, which was kind of out of the, and they were never really involved. In fact, I talked to their lobbyist, and the lobbyist, said, "Well, I keep trying to contact them about this, but no one's getting back to me." So they were part of it, but like they were non-existent. So anyway, that's how that went down. But working with the other three lobbyists was very, very instrumental.
All right. So do you guys, what advice would you have for doctors in other states that don't have this? What would be, if you were starting all over again from scratch, where would you start, and kind of what advice would you give for that?
Well, I would target the members of the Senate and House Health Committee in your state. Those are the folks that are going to hear your bill. I would get the chiropractic sports physicians involved, especially the ones that are actually working with athletes and or currently working as team doctors or working with teams and athletes and so forth. And I would tend to focus on the ones that are board certified, because then you can refer to that. Mm-hmm. Not that it's a necessity. And then you get those sports docs. You meet individually with those legislators. You don't just depend on the lay lobbyists. The lay lobbyists simply can't, except for me, I'm not a lay lobbyist, and your colleague, and that's kind of the distinction.
Yeah,
can't answer technical, specific questions on sports injuries and chiropractic sports injury protocols and training on the spot answers. They'll say, "Well, let me get back to you on that." Or, "Well, let me get back to you on that one too." And we met. I'd have 4 or 5, 6. One time we had 12 chiropractic sports doctors with me when we met with the Senate president. So make sure you insist that the chiropractic sports docs are part of the lobbying team, because they can sit there and they can answer their questions. The lobbyist isn't going to be able to. And then I would, this is about market share. This is about the money. The medicine will never say that, but that's what that's the opposition will be behind. It's not about student safety, student athlete safety. So I would connect up, even if we battled with the physical therapists here on certain issues. I would team up with the other health professions, the naturopathic physicians, the doctors of physical therapy. And I don't know that I'd ask the occupational therapists. I'm still not completely sure what they do, but anyway. But get the other groups in and find out if they're interested, and tell them what the battle plan is. Refer to Oregon. They can call me, and strengthen numbers.
Outstanding. So I've actually never met you before, so I'm kind of interested to know what brought you into getting involved with the legislation and lobbying and that kind of stuff.
How much time do we have?
Maybe we can do the
long and short of it is, that was the analogy I used. I was kind of the last guy without a chair when the music stopped, and the boiled down to we had gone through lay lobbyists, and we ended up having to fire a lobbyist when I was legislative chair. I'd always been involved in the legislature and so forth, and he pulled a knuckleheaded move where he decided he wanted twice as much. This is a brand new guy, and I recommended him. And we had fired a previous one, and I was acting as a lobbyist, unpaid, for the 2003 session. And I selected this guy. Well, we had a signed contract with him for a certain amount per month. He decides, just as the session started, he wanted twice as much money. And I was ticked. And so I reported back to my board, and they said, "Well, what should we do?" And I said, "What do you mean, what do you do?"
Fire him.
He's got a signed contract for a certain amount of money. The session's just starting. When we need him the most, he decides he wants twice as much money. In some circles, we call that extortion. It certainly isn't loyalty to the chiropractic profession. Yep. What do you mean? You fire his butt. And then came the deer in headlights moment when they said, "Well, you know the most. Will you do it?" And I went, okay. I said, okay. I went down from 5 days a week practice to 3 days a week, and I was going to do it temporarily until we got a real lobbyist, a professional lobbyist. I mean, that's what you do, isn't it? You get a professional.
Right, yeah.
We got 2 bills passed and started a chiropractic treatment room off the Senate chamber in my first session. We hadn't gotten anything done in decades. Okay. That concussion bill represents the 10th law I've gotten through, the 10th bill I've gotten through for the profession. And a myriad of policy changes that benefit the profession without legislation. So, and here's the key. I hope we're not running out of time. Here's the key that really, and other Vermont is the latest one that just hired a chiropractor as their lobbyist. In 2005, I was giving my spiel for our work comp study bill, comparing chiropractic to medical treatment. Who gets the best outcomes, reduce costs? We knew we'd kick their butts. And the study was going to be funded by the Worker Benefit Fund. And I gave my impassioned spiel to then Senator Vicki Walker, and she pushed back from her desk and she says to me, she says, and I was flying by the seat of my pants. I was learning process as a lobbyist quickly. And it's not rocket science. And she says, you know, Vern, she says, you have a different level of credibility with us than these other guys. And I went, I do? And she says, yeah, you do. She says, you're a chiropractor talking about chiropractic patient issues, and you're a chiropractor. She says, and you're a chiropractor. She says, that gives you a different level of credibility. These other guys are talking heads and hired guns, and they've got multiple clients representing different issues. And says, they'll be talking to me about one thing, Miller Paint one day, and the next day it's Verizon phone service. She says, but you have one client. She says, you know your stuff. You answer my questions to where I can understand them in lay terms, and you do it with passion. And that has really made the difference. It really has. And I can sit and I can give on-the-spot technical answers to technical questions that members of the legislature have that lay lobbyists simply cannot do. And they have splinters of time that they can spend with you as their client. They'll, at the board meeting, they'll basically tell you they died on the sword for you, but the reality is not that. And so in any of the states that are watching this, I would ask you, what is the substantive legislation you've gotten passed in your state in the last 10 years? If you have to pause and think about it, that's an indication you need a change. And I really make the case other states, and some states have been doing this, is hire as a chiropractic physician as your lobbyist or one of your lobbyists. Mm-hmm. It absolutely, I have no doubt, and I love doing it. It's very fulfilling, very satisfying to get this, like, win this concussion bill. It will make the difference.
Well, that all makes a lot of sense. So what's next for you guys? Do you have anything else?
Oh boy,
ready to go or?
Oh yeah. I've always got something in the hopper. Though we have the law on our side and the commercial health insurance with all non-discrimination provisions from the Accountable Care Act, the insurance companies are disregarding much of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Enforcement has been the problem, and so now we've got some pieces of legislation to enforce. And then also I've been working with the insurance commissioner to see if we can get them to say, no, we really meant non-discrimination, and produce a bulletin giving marching orders to the insurers. And then also we've got a bill working on our workers' comp, which has restricted us to the years. We've gradually expanded it. And we're in the case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, we're actually a large coalition, including the Oregon Medical Association, the Oregon Dental Association, the osteopaths, chiropractors, naturopaths, physical therapists, a package bill addressing some of the nonsensical pre-authorization crap that the insurers are doing, and huge co-pays and deductibles to where they don't even have chiropractic care. They just say they do on paper.
Right. Yeah.
A coalition bill to address, clearly not everything we want, but a coalition bill of all of the provider types to address some of those issues, which is very, very good.
Well, it sounds like you guys are doing some great work up there. And sure, thank you for representing the chiropractic world and the sports chiropractic world. And thank you for your time today. And
thank you.
Are you going to be in Minneapolis for the symposium?
That's the sports symposium?
Mm-hmm. With the sports council?
I've got a conflict. I can't make it. But
all right. Well, hopefully we'll catch up with you somewhere down the road.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.